like Taylor Swift, my starting salary was $41,000, which was somewhat humbling, having recently finished a decade of undergraduate and graduate studies. It turns out they're right when they say you don't get into teaching for the money. I eventually ended up at a small college in the western United States. I still teach a significant amount of A&P, but working at a small campus allows me to throw a broad disciplinary net. Over the years, I've taught classes that run the gamut from entomology to human dissection. When people ask what type of biologist I am, I never know quite what to say. I am a biologist who can identify beetles, but I can also tell you how your kidneys work. I am not sure what type of biologist that makes me. I think it just makes me a biologist. Period. My pain is your pain. I was not inspired to write this book by some set of unbelievable circumstances. I never lost half of my large intestine in a grizzly bear attack. I did not nearly die from dengue fever while attempting the first descent down an unexplored river in Africa. I do not suffer from any unusual genetic conditions, autoimmune disorders, or physiological anomalies. I have a normal, middle-aged body, which means I have the same types of problems everyone has. My teeth did not come in particularly straight. I blew out a knee playing basketball. Sometimes my back gets sore enough that it is hard for me to sleep. I did not think much about these ailments for years because none of them caused me an inordinate amount of trouble. I was also busy learning and teaching about all the ways the body works when it functions normally. Human anatomy and physiology is a complicated subject, and it takes a long time to get a handle on how the body runs under typical, pain-free circumstances. There are several good A&P textbooks, and all of them are more than 1,000 pages long. In the early years of my career, I was not thinking about the origins of conditions like myopia, or bunions, or gestational diabetes. I was more concerned with distilling those 1,000-plus pages into 2 semesters of course content in order to teach scores of future nurses and doctors how eyes, feet, and uteruses typically work. Questions about issues like choking, torn menisci, and the pain of childbirth came to me later, after I had established a foundation of knowledge about how our bodies work. How questions. Biologists and their students learn about bodily systems by asking questions. They can ask proximate questions in which they try to understand how something works. They can also ask ultimate questions, where they try to answer why a structure, process, or behavior is the way it is. Proximate questions take up most of the time in an A&P class. How do heart valves control blood flow? How does the ACL restrict the movement of the knee? How does the cornea refract light? Most of what we know about human anatomy and physiology comes from answers to those types of how questions. It makes sense because if you need to repair a heart valve, put a knee back together, or use a laser to correct someone's vision, you need to know how the structures work in order to fix them. How questions can have tremendously complicated answers. Teaching and learning A&P often does not extend beyond the proximate level because it takes so long to understand proximate level questions and answers. For example, to teach just the basics of muscle contraction, it takes several drawings, considerable discussion, and more than an hour of class time to cover physiology that, in real time, occurs in a fraction of a second. And mind you, this happens in a lower-level undergraduate class. If students revisit the subject in graduate or medical school, they learn many more layers of detail. Why questions? Even while spending so much time on proximate mechanisms in A&P, I never completely broke the habit of asking ultimate questions because of the other classes I teach. Ultimate questions get at the evolutionary roots of a topic. For example, in my class on animal behavior, instead of teaching how dolphins jump out of the water, which involves much of the same minutiae about nerve conduction and muscle contraction covered in A&P, I ask my students to think about why dolphins jump out of the water. Why questions make for great exercises in hypothesis generation and experimental design. Do dolphins jump to avoid